She's too senile to own a house, my daughter told the judge. She said it gently, almost sweetly, like the words hurt her more than they hurt me. Like she was being brave. Like she was a good daughter finally doing the hard thing for an old mother who no longer understood the world. The courtroom went quiet after she said it. Not completely quiet. Courtrooms are never completely quiet. There was still the soft hum of the lights above us, the faint scratch of a pen somewhere behind me, the shuffle of paper from the clerk's desk. But every human voice in that room disappeared. The judge looked at me over the top of his glasses. My daughter, Melissa, sat beside me in a navy blue dress I had paid for 2 years earlier when she said she needed something respectable for a job interview she never attended. Her hair was pinned back. Her pearls were small and tasteful. Her hand rested on top of mine on the table, but there was no love in the touch. It was pressure, a warning. "Stay quiet, Mom. Don't embarrass me. Don't make this harder than it has to be." Across from us, my son-in-law Brent leaned back in his chair with his mouth arranged into something that was supposed to look concerned. He had brought a folder thick enough to bury a woman in. Photographs, bank statements, medical notes, neighbor comments, printed emails, little scraps of my life stacked neatly together and labeled like evidence. He had always liked labels. They made stealing look organized. The judge turned one page in the folder, then another. "Mrs. Hayes," he said, "do you understand why you're here today?" Melissa squeezed my hand. I looked down at her fingers. Her nails were pale pink, perfectly shaped, paid for with the same credit card she had once begged me to keep open just until things got better. Then I looked back at the judge. "Yes, Your Honor," I said. "My daughter is asking the court to declare me incompetent so she can take control of my house." Melissa's face tightened. "Mom," she whispered, just loud enough for the front table to hear. "That is not what this is," but it was exactly what it was. The paper in front of the judge used softer words: temporary conservatorship, protective supervision, financial safety, residential management. There are 100 polite ways to put a hand into an old woman's purse and call it love. But the house was the point. It had always been the point. Before I tell you what was inside the service record that made that judge stand up, tell me where you're watching from. And if you've ever had family mistake your silence for weakness, type silent in the comments. You'll understand why I let them keep talking. My name is Eleanor Hayes. I was 72 years old that morning, though Melissa had started rounding me up to 80 whenever it helped her story. Widow, mother, grandmother, homeowner. According to my daughter, confused. According to my son-in-law, vulnerable. According to the petition in that folder, no longer capable of managing my own affairs. The house they wanted sat at the end of Maple Ridge Lane, a white 2-story with green shutters, a cracked brick walkway, and a kitchen window that faced the old oak tree my husband planted the year Melissa was born. Her father, Daniel, dug that hole himself with a cheap shovel and a bad back. I remember him standing there at sunset, his shirt soaked through, holding our baby girl against his shoulder while I poured water around the roots. "One day," he told her, though she was too small to understand, "you'll climb this tree and scare your mother half to death." She did. She climbed it at 7 and ripped her Sunday dress. She climbed it at 9 and got stuck until Daniel carried a ladder across the yard. She climbed it at 13 after her first heartbreak and refused to come down until I promised not to ask questions. That house had held every version of her. The little girl who used to sleep with one foot out of the blanket, the teenager who slammed doors and wrote dramatic poems in purple ink. The young woman who came home from college after 2 months because the world was crueler than she expected. The bride who stood in my bedroom while I fixed her veil because her hands were shaking too badly to do it herself. It had held me too. But Melissa had stopped seeing that. Sometime after Daniel died, my house became the property. She didn't say, "Mom, how are you handling the house?" She said, "Mom, we need to discuss the property. Not your kitchen, the kitchen. Not your bedroom, the downstairs room. Not your mortgage papers, the asset file." The first time she said it, I was standing at the sink washing the same blue coffee cup Daniel had used every morning for 38 years. She was behind me at the table with her laptop open, typing numbers into a spreadsheet. "At your age," she said, "it's not really about ownership anymore. It's about safety." I kept washing the cup. She mistook that for agreement. That was Melissa's first real mistake. People hear silence and put whatever meaning they want inside it. Obedience, confusion, fear, weakness. They never consider that silence can also be measurement. I was measuring my daughter long before she knew she was being counted. It started small, the way rot always does. 6 months after Daniel's funeral, Melissa called me crying from a grocery store parking lot. Brent had lost another job. Not fired, according to him. Restructured, downsized, misunderstood. There was always a better word than failed when Brent was the one doing the failing. They were behind on the car payment. "Just 1 payment," she said. Then 2. Then insurance. Then a credit card. Then the private school deposit for my granddaughter, Lily, because we can't let her suffer for adult problems, Mom. I sold the thin gold bracelet Daniel gave me on our 25th anniversary. I told myself jewelry was just metal. Children were flesh. Melissa hugged me in my hallway when I handed her the envelope. "I swear this is the last time," she said into my shoulder. I believed her because mothers are trained by God and grief to believe impossible things. The second time I did not sell jewelry. I withdrew from savings. The third time, I paid the electric bill directly because Brent had started calling me the family bank when he thought I couldn't hear. I heard everything. Old does not mean deaf. Quiet does not mean empty. And memory does not disappear just because the people who owe you money wish it would. I kept records, every check, every transfer, every handwritten note Melissa left on my counter saying, "I'll pay you back when things settle." I kept them in a brown accordion folder in the second drawer of Daniel's old desk. Melissa used to tease me for that. "Mom, nobody keeps paper anymore," she said one afternoon, watching me slide a receipt behind a labeled tab. "People who survive do," I told her. She laughed. Not cruelly then, not yet. Back then, there was still a daughter inside her, buried under stress and vanity, and the soft poison of being married to a man who thought shame was something other people should carry. Brent never laughed like Melissa did. His laugh always had a hook in it. He liked to stand in my kitchen and look around like he was estimating square footage. He noticed the original hardwood floors, the copper pots, the antique clock in the hall, the locked cedar chest beneath the stairs. But most of all, he noticed my metal footlocker. It sat in the back corner of the den under a folded quilt. Olive green, scratched, heavy. A white stencil on the side had faded until only 3 letters were clear. Hay, my last name, cut short by time. Brent saw it the way a raccoon sees a closed trash bin. "What's in the army box?" he asked one Thanksgiving. "Old things," I said. "Valuable old things? Depends who's asking." He smiled like I was being cute. Melissa rolled her eyes. Mom has always been dramatic about that box. I looked at my daughter then, really looked at her. She had eaten from my hands, slept under my roof, cried into my nightgown, and somehow in all those years, she had never once asked what I did before she was born. Not really. She knew I had served. That was the family word. Served. Soft, clean, distant. Like volunteering at a church supper. She did not know what my hands had carried. She did not know why I woke at 4:30 every morning without an alarm. She did not know why I could read a room faster than Brent could lie in one. And she did not know why that footlocker had 2 locks, not one. The first time I realized Masissa was no longer asking for help but preparing to take control, she brought forms to Sunday dinner. Lily was with her that day. My granddaughter was 16 then, all long legs and guarded eyes, wearing a sweatshirt too big for her and pretending not to listen while listening to every word. Melissa spread the papers on my table between the meatloaf and the green beans. "It's nothing scary," she said, "just temporary authority. In case something happens." "In case what happens?" I asked. She glanced at Lily. That was low. I knew it. She knew I knew it. "In case you fall," Melissa said. "Or forget something important. Or there's an emergency with the house. We just need to be able to step in." I picked up the first page. The top paragraph was ordinary. The second was softer than it should have been. The third had teeth. Financial representative, Brent Allen Porter. Not Melissa, Brent. I put the paper down. "No," I said. Melissa blinked. "No, no." Brent set down his fork. "Eleanor, don't make this into a pride thing." I looked at him until he picked the fork back up. Melissa's voice changed then. It became smaller, wounded. The voice she had used as a child when she wanted me to forgive her before admitting what she had done. "Mom, why are you making this so hard?" "We're trying to protect you," I almost answered. Then Lily's glass slipped. It tipped from the edge of the table, water flashing under the light. Brent flinched back. Melissa gasped. Lily froze. My hand moved before anyone else's breath finished catching. I caught the glass 2 inches above the floor. No spill, no break. Just my fingers wrapped around it, steady as a clamp. For 1 second, nobody spoke. Then Brent laughed. "Well," he said, "look at that! Guess the reflexes still work, even if the paperwork doesn't." Melissa laughed too, but not comfortably. Lily didn't laugh at all. She looked at my hand, then at my face. For the first time in years, someone in that family saw me clearly enough to be quiet. I set the glass back on the table. "Eat your dinner," I said, and that was all. But later that night, after they left, I went to Daniel's desk. I opened the second drawer and pulled out the brown accordion folder. Behind it, taped flat against the wood, was a small brass key. Not the key to the house, not the key to the footlocker. The key to the safe deposit box Melissa did not know existed. I held it in my palm for a long time. Then I took out a fresh sheet of paper and wrote down the date. Because that was the night I stopped, hoping my daughter would remember who I was, and started preparing for the day I would have to remind her in front of a judge. The next morning, I moved the brass key. Not far. People think hiding things means putting them somewhere clever. Behind a loose brick. Under a floorboard. Inside a hollow book. But clever hiding places are for people who read mystery novels and believe thieves are stupid. I had learned a long time ago that the best place to hide something important was inside a routine nobody respected. So I placed the key in an empty vitamin bottle labeled B12, set it behind 6 other bottles in the bathroom cabinet, and turned the label toward the wall. Melissa had never looked closely at my medicine. That would become important later. For 3 weeks after the Sunday dinner, she was sweet, too sweet. She called every morning, not to talk, to check. Did you sleep okay? Did you take your pills? Did you remember trash day? Did you leave the stove on? The questions came wrapped in concern, but concern has a smell when it has been left out too long. It turns sour. It becomes surveillance. At first, I answered normally. Then I started answering slowly. Not because I was confused, because I wanted to know who was listening. There is a difference between forgetting and withholding. Most people who have never been interrogated do not understand that. They think a pause is empty space. They do not realize a pause can be a mirror. Give a dishonest person enough silence, and they will start performing for the audience they think they have. Melissa was performing for Brent. I could hear it in the way she repeated my answers. You think today is Wednesday? I had not said that. I had said, "Isn't it Wednesday?" while looking directly at the calendar that said Thursday. She turned my question into a statement. That told me two things. First, she was writing things down. Second, she needed me to sound worse than I was. A week later, she drove me to a doctor I had never met. She told me it was a wellness check. Routine, nothing serious, just peace of mind. I sat in the passenger seat while she talked too much. Melissa always talked when she was nervous. As a child, she had confessed to breaking a lamp by explaining the weather, the dog, her socks, and 3 unrelated facts about school before finally admitting what happened. That morning, she talked about blood pressure, fall prevention, senior vitamins, a woman from church who had moved into assisted living and just loved it. I watched the road. Assisted living is not a grave, she said lightly. No, I said, but people do use the same voice for both. Her hands tightened around the steering wheel. The clinic was small and expensive, with soft gray chairs and framed photographs of sailboats on the walls. A receptionist smiled at me like I was already hard of hearing. "Can I get your date of birth, sweetheart?" "Sweetheart." I gave it to her. Melissa answered the next 3 questions before I could open my mouth. She takes medication in the morning. She lives alone. She's been having some incidents. I turned my head and looked at her. Incidents? Her cheeks colored. Mom, please? The doctor was a man in his 40s with clean hands and tired eyes. He asked me to remember 3 words. Apple, table penny. He asked me to draw a clock. He asked who the president was. He asked what year it was. He asked if I ever felt unsafe at home. I answered some questions quickly. Others I let sit, not long enough to fail. Just long enough for Melissa to lean forward in her chair. At the end, the doctor said, Mrs. Hayes appears alert and oriented, but there may be some age-related processing delay. I would recommend follow-up evaluation if family concerns continue. It was a careful sentence. Careful sentences can be sharpened later. Melissa heard the part she wanted. Age-related processing delay. She thanked him with both hands around his, as if he had handed her a key. On the drive home, she was quiet. That was how I knew she was pleased. The next phase came through the neighbors. I had lived on Maple Ridge Lane for 42 years. I knew which houses had bad pipes, which husbands drank in the garage, which wives smiled too hard at block parties, and which children had grown up into people their parents only pretended to understand. So when Mrs. Palmer from next door started appearing near my mailbox every afternoon, I knew Melissa had spoken to her. "Everything all right, Eleanor?" she asked one Tuesday. "Why wouldn't it be?" "Oh, no reason." She touched her pearls. "Melissa mentioned you've been a little forgetful." Forgetful. There it was. A word dropped gently into the neighborhood like poison in a well. By Friday, Mr. Atkins across the street was offering to check my smoke detectors. By Sunday, a casserole appeared on my porch with a note that said, "Thinking of you during this transition." Transition? I laughed so hard I had to sit down. That was when Brent made his first real move. He came to the house alone on a rainy Thursday afternoon. I watched his truck pull up from the upstairs window. Melissa had not called first, which meant she did not know he was there or had decided pretending not to know was safer. I let him knock twice before I opened the door. "Eleanor," he said, smiling too wide. "Just checking in. No, you're not." The smile held, but only at the edges. "Melissa's worried about you." Melissa worries when there's paperwork involved. He stepped inside without being invited. Some men do that because nobody ever taught them doors are boundaries. Brent did it because he liked watching women decide whether correcting him was worth the trouble. I closed the door behind him. He walked through my hallway slowly, eyes moving over the walls, the photographs, Daniel's old coat still hanging by the closet. His gaze stopped on the den, on the quilt, on the footlocker beneath it. "Still got that old army box," he said. "Still got a lot of old things. You know, if there are important documents in there, we really should get them organized." "We? For Melissa. In case the court needs." He stopped, only one word too late. I looked at him. "What court?" For the first time since I had known him, Brent's face emptied before he could refill it. "Just speaking generally," he said. "No, you weren't." The rain ticked against the window behind him. He chuckled, soft and ugly. "You always do this." "Do what?" "Act like everybody is attacking you when we're trying to help." I said nothing. That irritated him more than any insult would have. He stepped closer to the den doorway. "Do you even know what's in that box anymore?" "Yes, then open it." "No." His jaw moved. There are men who cannot stand a locked thing owned by someone they do not respect. Brent was one of them. He left 5 minutes later, but not before looking once more at the footlocker. That look told me everything I needed to know. 2 days later, while I was at church, someone broke into my den. Not the house, just the den. That was the arrogance of it. The back door showed no damage because Melissa still had a key. The hallway was untouched. The desk drawers were opened, but not disturbed enough for a stranger. The silver remained in the cabinet. Daniel's watch remained on the dresser, but the quilt had been thrown aside. The footlocker was scratched. The second lock was cracked clean through. Whoever opened it had expected cash, a will, maybe jewelry. What they found instead was cloth, paper, and metal. My old uniform jacket, a sealed brown envelope, a service photograph, a field notebook wrapped in oil paper, 2 medals Brent would not have known how to name, and one document marked with words that should have made a smarter man close the lid and call a lawyer. He did not take the medals. He took photographs. That was his second mistake. He also moved the field notebook from the left side of the locker to the right. That was his third. People who do not understand order think all old paper looks the same. I stood in the doorway for a long while looking at the broken lock. I did not call Melissa. I did not call the police. Not yet. I took out my own camera and photographed everything exactly as it was. The scratches on the lock, the mud print near the rug, the corner of Brent's hardware store receipt sticking out from under the desk where he had dropped it, the disturbed dust line on the lid. Then I put on gloves, lifted the broken lock into a plastic bag, and labeled it with the date and time. Chain of custody is not a phrase most daughters expect their elderly mothers to know. Melissa called that evening. I let it ring 4 times. "Mom," she said, breathless. "How was church?" "Fine. Did you go anywhere after?" No. Did anyone stop by? There it was. A fishing line. I pictured Brent beside her, mouthing questions. No, I said. Nobody stopped by. Silence. Then softer, are you sure? I looked at the broken lock inside the plastic bag on my kitchen table. Yes, I said. I'm sure. The next week, the incidents began. First, the stove. Melissa arrived unexpectedly at 8:20 on a Monday morning and claimed she smelled gas. She rushed into the kitchen, turned a burner knob, and opened the window. Brent appeared behind her with his phone already in his hand. Mom! Melissa cried. You left it on. I looked at the stove. The burner she pointed to was the one I never used because the flame clicked unevenly. I had stopped using it after Daniel died. Everyone who had ever made tea in that kitchen knew that. Brent took photographs anyway. Just documenting, he said. The second incident was the pills. Melissa came by to help organize my medicine and gasped when she opened the cabinet. Mom, these are all mixed up. They were, but not by me. The bottles had been arranged alphabetically. Amlodipine, B12 calcium, D3. Alphabetical order was for office shelves and men like Brent. I took medication by time. Morning on the left, evening on the right, weekly refill in the blue tray. Emergency lists taped inside the cabinet door. I had followed harder schedules under worse conditions than a quiet bathroom in Ohio. But Melissa held up the bottles like a prosecutor holding a weapon. This is exactly what I'm talking about. I watched Brent's eyes flick toward the B12 bottle. He had touched it. He had not known what was inside. The brass key was no longer there, of course. I had moved it again after the footlocker. Routine only works until the enemy notices the routine. The third incident was the bank. A statement appeared in Melissa's evidence stack showing what looked like erratic withdrawals. 700, 1,000, cash, cash, cash. Melissa cried over the phone. Mom, are you giving money to someone? Is someone scamming you? Yes, I said. She went quiet. Then I added, but not the way you mean. The withdrawals were real. So were the deposits that followed. Brent had not included those pages. Money out, money back in, patterned, timed, documented. I had been moving funds into protected accounts for weeks, not because I was confused, because I was done. The ambush came on a Wednesday. Melissa arrived with Lily in the passenger seat and a smile so fragile it looked painted on. Mom, she said, we have a small appointment downtown. What kind of appointment? Just legal housekeeping. With whom? A court advisor. Which court? She looked away. Lily sat in the car, staring straight ahead, pale and silent. That was why I went. Not because Melissa fooled me, because my granddaughter looked like a child trapped in a room where adults had locked all the doors. I took my purse, my brown folder, my photograph, and the sealed copy of my service record from the safe deposit box Melissa had never found. Melissa noticed the folder. What's that? Paper, I said. Brent was waiting at the courthouse. That was when I knew it was not housekeeping. He wore a gray suit too tight across the stomach and carried the thick folder that would later sit in front of the judge. He kissed Melissa on the cheek, then looked at me with the satisfied patience of a man watching a door close from the correct side. Eleanor, he said, you're doing the right thing. No, I said. I'm doing the necessary thing. He smiled because he did not understand the difference. Inside the hearing room, Melissa guided me to the chair beside her as if I might wander off. She placed her hand on mine for the first time that morning. Pressure, warning, performance. The clerk called our names. Judge Whitaker entered. Everyone stood. I stood too, straight enough that Brent's smile flickered. Then we sat, and my daughter opened her mouth to explain why the woman who had given her a home was no longer fit to own one. I let her speak. I let Brent pass the folder forward. I let the room believe for a little while that I was just an old woman being carried gently toward the loss of everything she had built. Because there are moments when fighting too early saves your pride but ruins your proof. And I had not come there to save my pride. I had come there to make a record. Melissa began with tears. Not real tears. Real tears change a person's breathing. They break the rhythm. They make words uneven. Melissa's voice stayed smooth, careful, polished by rehearsal. "Your Honor," she said, "this is the hardest thing I have ever had to do." I almost smiled, not because it was funny, because I had watched Melissa say the same sentence when she returned a dress after wearing it to a wedding, when she quit a job before they could fire her, and when she told me Brent only needed one more chance. Some people do not lie by inventing new words, they lie by wearing out old ones. Judge Whittaker folded his hands on the bench. He was a narrow man with silver hair, steady eyes, and the tired patience of someone who had listened to families turn love into paperwork for too many years. "Go ahead, Mrs. Porter," he said. Melissa touched my arm. "Performance. My mother has always been independent," she began. "Strong-willed, proud, and I admire that. I do. But in the last year, Zeev seen changes." Brent lowered his eyes at exactly the right moment. I watched the judge notice. Good judges see performance. Better judges wait to see whether performance has documents. Brent had documents. Melissa continued. "She forgets appointments. She leaves things on. She gets confused about money. She becomes defensive when we try to help. She lives alone in a 2-story house, and we are terrified something will happen before anyone can reach her." The word terrified landed well. Fear is useful in court. Fear makes theft sound like prevention. Judge Whittaker looked at me. "Mrs. Hayes, do you live alone?" "Yes, Your Honor." "Do you have stairs in the home?" "Yes." "Any recent falls?" "No." Melissa opened her mouth. The judge lifted one finger without looking at her. She closed it. That small moment pleased me more than it should have. Brent slid the thick folder toward the court clerk, who carried it to the judge. The folder made a soft, heavy sound when it landed on the bench. Paper can be theatrical if a dishonest man stacks enough of it. The judge opened it. Melissa dabbed the corner of one eye with a tissue. Brent watched the judge's hands. I watched Brent. That is a habit you never lose. In a room full of noise, you do not watch the weapon. You watch the person who brought it. The first photograph showed my stove. Burner knob turned slightly. Window open. Melissa's hand in the corner of the frame blurred as if she had rushed in to save me from my own decline. Judge Whittaker looked at it, then at the date printed below. "March 12th, he said. Melissa nodded. "I found the gas on when I came by to check on her." "You smelled gas?" "Yes." "Was emergency service called?" Melissa hesitated. Brent answered too quickly. "We handled it immediately." The judge's eyes shifted to him. Brent added, "We didn't want to embarrass Eleanor. There it was." The first time, he used my name like pity. I kept my hands folded. The second document was the doctor's note. Age-related processing delay. There are phrases that do nothing by themselves, but become dangerous when placed beside photographs. One careful sentence from a doctor. One staged stove knob. One daughter crying in a courtroom. Suddenly a widow becomes a risk factor. The third exhibit was the medication photograph. My bathroom cabinet, bottles arranged alphabetically. Melissa's handwriting on a yellow sticky note, found like this, unsafe. Judge Whittaker turned another page. Bank withdrawals, neighbor statements. A note from Mrs. Palmer saying I had seemed distant and unlike myself. That one almost made me laugh again. I had been distant from Mrs. Palmer since 1989, when she told everyone on the block that Daniel had lost his job before he had even come home to tell me himself. But now her distance had become evidence. Melissa leaned forward. Your Honor, we are not trying to take anything away from her. We are trying to keep her safe. That was a clean sentence, too clean. The kind lawyers like and daughters memorize. The judge looked at the petition. You are asking for temporary authority over the residence, primary financial review, and emergency access to accounts. Only until we can assess what is best, Melissa said. Best. I had learned to fear that word when spoken by people who benefited from the decision. Judge Whitaker turned to me. Mrs. Hayes, do you understand the request? Yes. Can you explain it in your own words? Melissa's hand moved toward mine again. This time, I moved my hand before she touched it. A small thing. But I saw her notice. I looked at the judge. My daughter wants control of my house, my accounts, and my legal decisions. She would like the court to believe that is temporary. I do not. Melissa's face tightened. Mom, please don't do this, the judge said. Mrs. Porter let her answer. Brent shifted in his crack. Not large, not visible to anyone who was not looking for it, but his left knee began bouncing under the table. The judge asked me the date. I gave it. He asked my address. I gave it. He asked how long I had lived there. 42 years, I said. 4 months. 16 days if we count from the signing, 42 years and 1 month if we count from the move-in. The clerk looked up. Melissa gave a small, embarrassed laugh. She does that, she said softly. She gets caught on details. I turned to her. No, Melissa, I retain them. A silence followed. Not long, but long enough. Judge Whitaker wrote something down. Then Brent spoke. Your Honor, with respect, this is exactly the issue. Eleanor can recite old dates, old stories, old grievances, but daily judgment is different. Living safely is different. He had practiced that too. Daily judgment. Living safely, soft words over hard intentions. The judge asked, Mr. Porter, are you a petitioner in this matter? No, Your Honor. I'm here to support my wife. That was almost true. The most useful lies are. Melissa placed her tissue down and took over again. My mother has always been proud of managing things herself, but she is not who she used to be. There it was, the old execution line. Not who she used to be. Families say that when they want permission to stop seeing who you are. She forgets conversations, Melissa said. She becomes suspicious. She hides things from us. She keeps old military items and papers locked away like someone is coming to take them. Brent made a sympathetic sound. The judge glanced down at the folder again. Military items? He asked. Melissa waved a hand gently, dismissing half my life with 2 fingers. Oh, just old things. My mother served years ago, but she has become fixated on it lately. Fixated, I repeated. Melissa looked at me, warning in her eyes. Then she made the mistake I had been waiting for. Your Honor, she said, turning back to the bench. I love my mother, but she cannot separate the past from the present anymore. She thinks every concern is an attack. She thinks every question is some kind of interrogation. She's too senile to own a house. The room changed. A sentence can do that. The first time she had said it, at the beginning, it had been a claim. Now, after the folder, after the photographs, after the doctor's note, after Brent's careful posture, it became a verdict she wanted the judge to borrow. She's too senile to own a house. I did not blink. I did not cry. I did not look at Lily, though I could feel her behind me somewhere in the second row. Melissa had insisted she come. A witness, maybe. A prop, certainly. But I knew my granddaughter's breathing well enough to hear when it changed. She had heard the sentence too. The judge took off his glasses. "Mrs. Hayes," he said carefully, "would you like to respond to what your daughter has said?" I looked at Melissa. Her eyes were shiny now, but not from sadness. From anticipation, she thought I would defend myself emotionally. She thought I would talk about motherhood, sacrifice, all the years, all the money, all the times she came home broken and left repaired. She thought I would sound wounded. Wounded old women are easy to dismiss. Angry old women are easier. So I gave her neither. "Yes, Your Honor," I said. "But first, may I ask my daughter one question?" Judge Whitaker studied me. "What question?" I turned slightly toward Melissa. "Did you personally review every document in that folder before it was submitted to this court?" Brent's knee stopped bouncing. Melissa blinked. "Yes," she said. "Every photograph?" "Yes." "Every statement?" "Yes." "Every page?" Her voice sharpened. "Yes, Mom." I nodded once. Then I looked at Brent. "And did your husband help prepare those materials?" Melissa opened her mouth, but Brent answered for her. "Of course I did," he said. Someone had to keep things organized. I let the word settle. Someone had to keep things organized. "Judge Whitaker wrote that down too," I said. "Thank you." Brent frowned. He did not understand why I had thanked him. That was usually the moment men like Brent made another mistake. They could not stand silence after a question. They needed to fill it. They needed to explain themselves back into control. He leaned forward. "I took the photographs myself, Your Honor. I documented what we found. The stove, the pills, the condition of the house. We've been dealing with this for months." I looked down at my hands so he would keep going. He did. "She refuses help. She hides documents. She accuses us of stealing. She has a locked military trunk in her den. She won't let anyone touch. It's not normal. Not normal." I could have asked him then how he knew what was inside the trunk. I did not. Not yet. There is a rhythm to closing a trap. Pull too soon and the animal tears free. Wait too long and it chews through its own leg. The trick is pressure, steady, patient, exact. The judge turned to me again. "Mrs. Hayes, do you dispute the authenticity of the photographs?" "No, Your Honor." Melissa's shoulders lowered in relief. Brent almost smiled. I added, "I dispute the story attached to them." The judge leaned back. For the first time that morning, he looked interested rather than patient. Behind me, Lily shifted in her seat. I reached into my purse and touched the edge of the photograph I had brought with me. 3 young soldiers in a desert hangar, dust on our boots, sun in our eyes, my face 37 years younger, but my posture exactly the same. Not yet, I told myself. Let them stand on the bridge before you cut the rope. Judge Whitaker said, "Then explain the stove." I looked at the photograph in his folder. The burner shown in that picture is the front left burner. Yes. I have not used that burner since November 3rd, 2019. Melissa made a sound under her breath. The judge looked at her, then back at me. Why not? The igniter clicks twice before it catches. My husband used to fix it. After he died, I stopped using it. That does not prove you did not turn it on. No, Your Honor, I said. It proves whoever staged the photograph did not know my kitchen. Brent's face hardened. Melissa whispered, "Staged?" I ignored her. The judge picked up the medication photograph. And this? My pills are arranged by time. Morning on the left, evening on the right, weekly refill in a blue tray. That photograph shows them alphabetized. I have never used alphabetical order for medication in my life. Brent gave a short laugh. That's ridiculous. Anyone could say that after the fact. Yes, I said. Anyone could. Then I looked directly at him. That is why records matter, his mouth closed. If you've ever watched someone lie about you while everyone else believed them, type silent in the comments. Because sometimes silence is not surrender. Sometimes silence is just waiting until the liar signs his own name. Judge Whitaker tapped the edge of the folder. Mrs. Hayes, you said you dispute the story attached to the photographs. Do you have documentation? Yes, Your Honor. Melissa turned toward me quickly. That was the first time she looked afraid. Not guilty, not sorry, afraid. There is a difference. I opened my brown folder and removed a single sheet. Not the service record, not the photograph, not the deed. A single handwritten medication schedule, copied in my own hand, dated every Sunday for 6 months, with pharmacy refill slips stapled behind it. The clerk carried it to the bench. The judge read. Brent stared at the paper like it had insulted him. Melissa whispered, "Mom, what is that?" I looked at her. A record. Her lips parted. I could see the girl she had been flicker behind her eyes. The girl who knew I kept receipts. The girl who knew I wrote dates on envelopes. The girl who had once teased me for saving every scrap of paper because nobody keeps paper anymore. Now paper was breathing in the room with us. Judge Whitaker looked from my schedule to the photograph, then to Brent. "Mr. Porter," he said, "you testified that you took this medication photograph yourself?" Brent swallowed. "I didn't testify. I just said, you stated it to the court." Brent's throat moved again. "Yes. And you found the bottles arranged in the condition shown?" "Yes." I kept my eyes on his hands. They were clean, soft, restless. The hands of a man who had broken a lock and thought scratches disappeared if nobody had the courage to point at them. Judge Whitaker turned to me. "Mrs. Hayes, do you have additional documentation?" "Yes, Your Honor." This time, I reached into my purse and placed the old service photograph on the table. Melissa stared at it like she had never seen it before, because she had not. Brent looked annoyed, because he still thought it was sentimental. The judge looked at it from the bench, not yet understanding why the air had shifted. 3 soldiers, a desert hangar, a stenciled crate behind us, a unit patch on my shoulder, and a name written in black ink across the bottom. E. Hayes. I rested my fingers on the edge of the photograph. My daughter said, "I cannot separate the past from the present," I said. "But the past is the reason I know how to document the present." Then I looked at Brent, and it is the reason I know when evidence has been tampered with. The courtroom went still again. This time, nobody mistook it for weakness. Judge Whitaker looked at the old photograph for a long time. Not because he understood it yet, because something about it had interrupted the story he had been handed. That is what evidence does when it is real. It does not need to shout. It simply refuses to fit inside a lie. Melissa stared at the picture with her mouth slightly open. I could see her trying to place it, trying to decide whether it was dangerous. To her, it was only an old military photograph. Dust, uniforms, young faces, a past she had never cared enough to ask about. To Brent, it was worse than useless. He thought I was reaching for sentiment. Old woman brings old photograph. Old woman wants respect. Old woman misses who she used to be. That was the story he understood, because that was the story he needed. Judge Whitaker adjusted his glasses. "Mrs. Hayes," he said, "tell me why this photograph is relevant." I touched the corner of it with one finger, because that was the first place I learned chain of custody, Your Honor. Brent exhaled sharply through his nose. "Chain of custody," he said. "For a stove picture?" The judge looked at him. Brent sat back, I continued. "When something goes wrong, you do not begin with what people say happened. You begin with what the physical record can prove. Who touched it? When? Where? What changed? What stayed the same? I turned slightly toward Melissa. My daughter says I cannot separate the past from the present. She is wrong. The past is how I learned to survive the present. Melissa whispered, "Mom, stop." I looked at her. Not yet. The words came out quietly, but I saw her flinch. Judge Whitaker picked up the stove photograph again. "All right," he said. "Walk me through this." I did not stand. I did not raise my voice. I simply pointed. The photograph shows my front left burner turned on. It shows the kitchen window open. It shows the clock on the microwave. The judge leaned closer to the image. "What time is on the microwave?" 8:14. Melissa nodded quickly. "Yes, it was early." I came over before work. I looked at her. "Melissa, you have not arrived anywhere before work since 2006. A sound moved through the second row. Someone swallowed a laugh and killed it. Melissa's face reddened. The judge said, "Mrs. Hayes, my apologies, Your Honor, but I was not sorry." I pointed again. "The issue is not whether my daughter rises early. The issue is the window." Judge Whitaker looked down. "The window? My kitchen window faces east. In the morning, the light comes directly through it and hits the left side of the stove. In that photograph, the light is not entering from the east. It is reflected from the hallway mirror behind the photographer." Brent shifted. I heard the chair legs scrape softly. "That means the overhead light was on," I continued. "Not morning light, artificial light. And if you look at the glass in the window, you can see the reflection of the person taking the picture." The judge brought the photograph closer. Melissa turned toward Brent. Brent did not look at her. There it was, the first real separation between them. Until that moment, they had been one machine. Concerned daughter, supportive husband, shared folder, shared performance. But lies create weak seams and pressure finds them. Judge Whitaker said, "Mr. Porter, did you take this photograph?" Brent cleared his throat. "I took several photographs over a period of time. That was not my question." "Yes," Brent said. "I believe I took that one." "You believe?" "Yes, I took it. And when did you take it?" "When we found the stove on." "What time?" Brent looked at Melissa. She looked at the folder. Neither of them looked at me. I opened my brown folder again and removed a second sheet. This one was not dramatic. No medal, no photograph, just a printed service receipt from the gas company, dated 2 months before the alleged incident. The front left burner had been disconnected from the gas line, I said. The igniter still clicked, but it could not release gas. My husband used to repair it himself. After he died, I paid to have it disabled. The clerk carried the receipt to the bench. Judge Whitaker read it. Melissa went very still. Brent's lips parted, then closed. I had seen that look before on men under pressure, the mind running through doors. Which exit was open? Which lie had burned? Which person could still be blamed? He chose the obvious one. "How would I know that?" Brent said. "If she never tells anyone anything, how would I know?" I turned to him. "You would not." His shoulders lowered half an inch. Then I said, "That was the point." The courtroom went quiet again. Judge Whitaker looked from me to Brent. I let the silence do what silence does best. It made the guilty uncomfortable. The judge picked up the medication photograph next. And the medication? I handed over the pharmacy refill sheets, the handwritten schedule, and a photograph I had taken of my bathroom cabinet 2 weeks before Melissa's so-called discovery. Morning on the left, evening on the right, blue tray beneath, emergency list taped inside the door. The alphabetized arrangement appears only in their photograph, I said. Not before, not after. Brent gave another laugh, but this one had no hook in it. It was flat, dry. This is absurd. She could have rearranged it after. Yes, I said. I could have. Then I removed the third item from my folder. A small printed photograph of my bathroom mirror. In the corner of the mirror was Brent. Not his face, not fully, but enough. Gray suit sleeve, gold watch, phone raised, Melissa's pink nails on the cabinet door. The mirror caught both of you, I said. Melissa looked like I had slapped her. You photographed us? No, I said. I photographed my cabinet every Sunday after you began asking questions about my pills. Why would you do that? She whispered. I looked at her for a long moment. Because you are my daughter. And I knew I would need proof before I let myself believe what you were doing. That hurt her. Good. Not enough, but honestly. For the first time that morning, her eyes filled with something close to real tears. Not remorse, not yet. But the shock of being seen without costume. Brent was done pretending sadness. Your Honor, he said, voice rising, this is exactly what we mean. This level of paranoia. Photographing cabinets. Saving receipts. Accusing family members. Mr. Porter, the judge said. Brent stopped. Judge Whitaker's voice had changed. Not much, but enough. This court will decide what is relevant. Brent sat back hard. I had one more bridge to make him cross. I looked at the judge. Your Honor, may I address the claim that I hide important documents? Yes. Melissa's head turned slowly toward me. Brent's jaw tightened. Now he understood too late. I reached into my purse and took out a clear plastic evidence bag. Inside, it was the broken lock from my footlocker. The moment Brent saw it, his face lost its shape. Not all at once. Not the public collapse. That would come later. This was smaller. A tightening around the mouth, a flick of the eyes toward Melissa, a small movement of his hand toward his jacket pocket, then back to the table. The judge noticed. I placed the bag on the table. This lock was broken 2 days after Mr. Porter came to my house and asked me to open my footlocker. Melissa whispered, Brent? He did not answer her. I continued. I found mud from his work boots on my den rug, a hardware store receipt under my desk, and the contents of the footlocker disturbed. Judge Whitaker said, Did you file a police report? Not immediately. Why not? Because I wanted to know what he would do with what he found. Brent stood halfway. This is insane. Sit down. Porter, the judge said. Brent sat, but his face had gone pale around the mouth. I opened the brown folder once more and removed the hardware store receipt, the photographs of the scratched lock, the disturbed dust line on the footlocker lid, and the field notebook moved from left to right. The clerk carried them forward. My son-in-law did not steal cash because there was no cash. He did not take the medals because he did not know what they meant. But he photographed what he thought would make me look unstable. Old uniforms, sealed envelopes, military records. He wanted the court to believe I was fixated on the past. Judge Whitaker's eyes moved to Brent. And were there sensitive documents inside that footlocker? Yes, Your Honor, Brent said. How was I supposed to know that? I turned to him. You were supposed to know because the envelope was marked. His face emptied. He remembered it then. That was the thing about dishonest people. They forgot what they had seen until the honest person named it. I took a breath, not because I was nervous, because some doors, even when you open them yourself, still bring old air with them. There was a copy of my service record in that locker, I said, a redacted copy, lawfully retained. Alongside commendations, unit correspondence, and property documentation connected to my later federal work. Melissa stared at me. Federal work? I looked at my daughter. You never asked. That sentence landed harder than I expected. For a second, the courtroom disappeared, and I saw her at 8 years old, sitting at my kitchen table with peanut butter on her sleeve, asking why I left before sunrise. I had told her, work. She had accepted that because children accept the world their parents build around them. Later, when she was old enough to ask, she simply did not. Judge Whitaker said, "Mrs. Hayes, may I see the service record?" I picked up the sealed envelope. My hand did not shake, but I felt the weight of it. Not paper weight, years weight, dust, heat, noise, names. Men carried on stretchers, women on radios, a young version of me learning that panic was expensive and precision saved lives. I handed it to the clerk. Melissa reached for my wrist. "Mom." I looked down at her hand. This time, I did not let her touch me. The clerk gave the envelope to Judge Whitaker. He checked the seal, read the label, looked at me over his glasses. "Mrs. Hayes, this is marked as a certified copy." "Yes, Your Honor." "From the National Personnel Records Center?" "Yes. And you obtained this when?" 4 weeks ago." Brent looked up sharply. 4 weeks ago, before the doctor, before the stove, before the pills, before the hearing, before they thought I understood. Melissa's voice was barely above a whisper. "You knew?" I turned toward her. I hoped I was wrong. She swallowed. "And when did you stop hoping?" I did not answer right away. Then I said, "When you brought my granddaughter to watch you take my house." Lily made a small sound behind me. Melissa's face crumpled, then hardened again. She was not ready to be sorry. She was only ready to be cornered. Judge Whitaker opened the envelope. The paper inside was thick, official, clean. He read the first page. At first, his face was only focused. Then his eyes stopped moving. Something changed in the muscles around his jaw. He turned the page more slowly, then another. The courtroom seemed to shrink around the sound of paper. Melissa stared at the judge. Brent stared at me. I looked at the photograph on the table. 3 young soldiers in a desert hangar. The judge turned back to the first page. His thumb rested beside my printed name, Eleanor M. Hayes. Then his eyes moved to the commendation beneath it, Operation Sandglass. For the first time all morning, Judge Whitaker did not look tired. He looked shaken. He looked at me once, then back at the page, and then he did something my daughter did not understand, my son-in-law could not control, and the entire room would remember. He pushed his chair back, slowly, deliberately, and rose to his feet. Judge Whitaker stood, not quickly, not dramatically. That would have made it smaller. He stood the way men stand when something old and official has entered the room before they had time to prepare themselves for it. His chair legs gave a quiet wooden scrape against the floor. The clerk looked up. Melissa turned her head from the judge to me, then back to the judge, searching for the rule she had missed. Brent's mouth opened slightly. He did not understand respect unless it was being aimed at him. Judge Whitaker held the first page of my service record in both hands. "Mrs. Hayes," he said. His voice was different now. Lower, cleaner, not kinder exactly, more careful. "Yes, Your Honor." He looked down again at the page, as if confirming what he had already read. "Eleanor Margaret Hayes." "Yes." "Sergeant First Class." "Yes, Your Honor." A sound moved through the courtroom, not loud. Just the small human sound of people rearranging a person in their minds. 10 minutes earlier, I had been an old woman in a cardigan whose daughter said she was too senile to own a house. Now there was a rank in the room, a record, a life that did not belong to Melissa's version of me. The judge turned another page. "Operation Sandglass," he said. I did not answer. Some names are not questions. Some names are doors. Judge Whitaker read in silence for several seconds. His face did not soften. It tightened, the way faces do when memory and duty meet each other unexpectedly. "My father was a Marine," he said. Brent shifted, confused by the turn. Melissa's lips parted. "He never spoke much about that deployment," the judge continued. But he kept a list of names in his desk. Men and women, he said, had done more than the record would ever show. He looked at me. "I saw your name on that list when I was 16 years old." The room disappeared for half a breath, not because I wanted it to. Because the past has a way of standing behind you when someone finally calls it by its proper name. I saw dust first, always dust, the kind that got into teeth, eyes, wounds, radios, prayers, then the hangar, then the crates. Then the line of wounded waiting for evacuation while the radio failed twice and the young lieutenant kept saying we were out of time. I had not thought of Judge Whitaker's father in years. I had not known he became a father. That is the strange mercy of surviving. People you save go on living lives you never see. I looked at the judge. "He had a scar over his right eyebrow," I said. Judge Whitaker's face changed. "Yes," he said quietly. He argued with me about the morphine count. For the first time all morning, the judge almost smiled. That sounds like him. Melissa looked at me as if I had started speaking a language she should have learned at birth and never bothered to study. Brent's eyes flicked toward the door. That was when I knew he understood enough. Not the service, not the operation, not the honor. Men like Brent never really understand honor, but he understood danger. Judge Whitaker sat down slowly. When he did, the room sat with him. He placed my service record on the bench, squared it with the edge, and looked at the petition again. The paper seemed thinner now. All Brent's photographs, all Melissa's gentle phrases, all the neighbor statements and staged concern had been built around one claim that I was too diminished to know what was happening to me. But the record on the bench told another story. Not that I had once been young, not that I deserved sentimental respect. That was not the point. The point was competence, documentation, memory, precision, training, the ability to observe, preserve, and present facts in order. The exact abilities my daughter had claimed I no longer possessed. Judge Whitaker looked at Brent. "Mr. Porter." Brent straightened too quickly. "Yes, Your Honor. You stated earlier that you personally took photographs submitted in support of this emergency petition. I helped my wife document concerns. That is not what I asked." Brent swallowed. "Yes, and you entered Mrs. Hayes' home and accessed her footlocker? No, I mean, I didn't." Melissa turned to him. "Brent?" He looked at her with irritation, as if her fear was inconvenient. Judge Whitaker's voice cut through both of them. "Did you access the footlocker?" Brent's throat moved. I was concerned there might be important legal documents inside. "Was it your property?" "No." "Did Mrs. Hayes give you permission?" "She's not always in a position to." "Did she give you permission?" The room held still. "No," Brent said, one word. Small, deadly. Melissa's hand went to her necklace. Judge Whitaker made a note. "Did you photograph materials inside that footlocker?" Brent said nothing. "Mr. Porter." "Yes." And some of those photographs informed the claim that Mrs. Hayes was fixated on military documents and unable to separate past from present. Brent's face had gone pale now. Not white yet. That would come in a moment. But pale enough that the skin around his lips looked gray. "We were trying to help." That sentence had worked so many times in my kitchen. It did not work in court. Judge Whitaker looked at Melissa. "Mrs. Porter, you told this court you personally reviewed every document before submission." Melissa's eyes were wet again. This time, the tears were real enough to damage her makeup. "Yes," she whispered. You also told this court your mother was too senile to own a house. Her face folded. I was scared. No, I said. Everyone looked at me, even the judge. I had not meant to interrupt, but some lies are too familiar to let pass one more time. Melissa stared at me. I turned toward her fully. No, Melissa. You were not scared when you called me senile. You were careful. There is a difference. Her mouth trembled. Mom, please. You brought my granddaughter here to watch you take my house. Lily made a small broken sound from the second row. That was the first sound that hurt me. Not Melissa's tears, not Brent's lies. Lily. Because she was still young enough to think adults became honest when cornered. Melissa turned halfway toward her daughter, then stopped, as if she could not decide which audience mattered more. The judge said, Mrs. Hayes, do you wish to make a statement before I rule on the emergency petition? I looked at the folder on the table, at the stove photograph, at the medication picture, at the old service photograph, at my daughter's hand no longer reaching for mine. Yes, Your Honor. The room waited. I had imagined this moment differently in the weeks before it came. Some nights I thought I would be angry. Other nights I thought grief would climb up my throat and embarrass me. Once, while sitting at Daniel's desk, I thought I might ask Melissa why. Why was the childish question? Why did you do this? Why wasn't I enough? Why did every check I wrote disappear from your memory, but every boundary I set became cruelty? But sitting there, with the deed to my house in front of me and my service record on the bench, I no longer needed why. Why was for people still hoping the answer would change the damage, so I said something else. My daughter is not confused about what she filed. My son-in-law is not confused about what he staged. They did not come here because I left a stove on. They came because I would not sign over control of the house. Melissa shook her head, crying openly now. That's not true. I looked at her. Then answer one question. She froze. If the court granted your petition today, who would have authority over the property? She did not answer. Judge Whitaker looked down at the petition. Primary financial representative listed here is Brent Allen Porter. Lily whispered, Dad, that one word did what all my evidence had not done. It made Brent look ashamed for half a second, then angry. He leaned toward Melissa. Don't let them twist this. The judge's head lifted. Mr. Porter, you will not coach a petitioner in my courtroom. Brent sat back. His face was white now. Not pale, white. The kind of white that begins around the mouth and moves outward as the body understands before the pride does. Melissa looked smaller beside him. Not innocent, smaller. She had spent years letting Brent stand behind her bad choices so she could call them pressure instead of character. But now the paperwork had her name on it. The sentence had come from her mouth. She's too senile to own a house. Some words cannot be put back once the room has heard them. Judge Whitaker closed the folder. The emergency petition is denied. Melissa inhaled sharply. Brent said, Your Honor, I am not finished. He stopped. The judge continued. Based on the evidence presented today, I have concerns regarding the preparation of these materials, possible unauthorized entry into Mrs. Hayes' private property, potential misrepresentation to the court, and possible financial exploitation of an elderly homeowner. Elderly. I did not love the word, but I appreciated its legal weight. Melissa began to cry harder. Mom, I never wanted. I turned to her. Yes, you did. The simplicity of it silenced her. Judge Whitaker said, Mrs. Hayes, do you currently have any shared account access, powers of attorney, emergency property permissions, or household keys held by either petitioner or Mr. Porter? I had been waiting for that question. Yes, Your Honor. My daughter has a house key. She is listed as emergency contact at my bank and pharmacy. She also has limited access to one household maintenance account. Do you wish to revoke that access? Melissa looked at me then. Really looked. For one suspended second, she was not the woman in pearls sitting beside a failed scheme. She was my daughter, my baby, the child who once climbed the oak tree and waited for me to rescue her. And I did love her. That was the part people like Brent never understood. Love does not vanish when trust dies. It simply has nowhere safe to stand. I faced the judge. Yes, Your Honor, before lunch if possible. Melissa made a sound like I had cut her. Maybe I had. Judge Whitaker nodded to the clerk. We will enter immediate protective orders limiting access pending further review. I will also refer the matter for appropriate inquiry. Mrs. Hayes, I strongly recommend you speak with counsel today regarding your trust, property access, and personal security. I already have an appointment at 1:30, I said. For the first time, the clerk smiled. Just a little. Judge Whitaker looked at me for a long moment. I suspect you do. Brent stared at the table. Melissa covered her face. Lily stood from the second row. Grandma? Her voice was small. Melissa turned. Lily, sit down. But Lily did not sit. She walked to the front with her hands shaking and stopped beside my chair. I didn't know, she said. I looked up at her. I know. They said you were forgetting things. I was remembering things they hoped I wouldn't. Tears spilled down her face. I'm sorry. I touched her hand. Not Melissa's, Lily's. You are not responsible for the adults who used you as furniture. The judge pretended to read a paper while my granddaughter cried. I respected him for that. When the hearing ended, Melissa followed me into the hallway. Brent did not. He stayed near the courtroom door, speaking sharply into his phone, already building the next version of himself where none of this was his fault. Melissa caught my sleeve by the elevator. Mom. I stopped. She looked ruined, but ruined is not the same as changed. We can fix this, she said. No. The word came easily now. We're family. I looked at her hand on my sleeve until she removed it. Family does not try to inherit a woman before she dies. Her face crumpled again. I was desperate. I know. Brent said, I know. I didn't think it would go this far. That was the first honest thing she had said all morning. I leaned closer, not enough to comfort her, only enough that she would hear every word. No, Melissa, you thought it would go exactly this far. You just thought I would be too old to stop you. The elevator opened. Lily stepped inside with me. Melissa did not. As the doors began to close, my daughter said, Mom, please don't shut me out. I looked at her through the narrowing gap. You locked yourself out when you called it the property. The doors closed before she could answer. That afternoon, I changed the locks. Not the next week. Not after I calmed down. That afternoon, a locksmith named Henry came at 2:15. He was a kind man with thick glasses who did not ask questions when he saw the courthouse folder on my table. He simply replaced the front lock, the back lock, the den lock, and the small brass latch on Daniel's old desk. When he finished, he handed me 4 new keys. I kept one. I gave one to Lily 3 months later, after her 18th birthday, when she came to my porch alone and apologized without blaming either parent. The other 2 went into the safe deposit box. That evening, I made tea in the kitchen, not on the front left burner. I still did not use that one. Some habits are safety. Some are grief. Some are both. The house was quiet, but not empty. Daniel's cup sat beside the sink. The oak tree moved outside the window. The footlocker rested in the den with a new lock on it, the old service photograph back inside, wrapped where it belonged. I sat at the table and opened the trust documents my attorney had prepared. Melissa's direct access was removed. Brent's name was removed from everything. A portion of the estate went into a protected education fund for Lily. Another portion went to a veterans housing charity Daniel and I had supported quietly for years. The house remained mine, not because a judge stood up, not because of a service record, not because of one good day in court. The house remained mine because I finally stopped confusing sacrifice with permission. For years, I had believed being a mother meant leaving the door open no matter how many times someone walked in carrying a knife and called it need. I was wrong. A home without boundaries is not love. It is a target. 3 weeks later, a letter came from Melissa. I recognized her handwriting before I opened it. Round letters, careful loops. The same handwriting that used to write, "I'll pay you back soon." On notes tucked beside unpaid bills, the letter said she was sorry. It said Brent had pressured her. It said she had been scared. It said she missed me. I read it twice. Then I placed it in the brown accordion folder behind the tab marked Melissa. Not because I planned revenge, because records matter. I still loved my daughter, but I did not give her a key. People think the worst thing you can lose with age is memory. It is not. The worst thing you can lose is the habit of believing your own eyes. That morning in court, my daughter told a judge, "I was too senile to own a house. She was wrong. I remembered every payment, every insult, every staged photograph. Every squeeze of my hand meant to keep me quiet." And when the judge opened my service record and stood up, he was not standing for who I used to be. He was standing because he finally saw who had been sitting there the whole time. So if someone in your life has mistaken your silence for weakness, remember this: you do not have to shout to be dangerous. You do not have to beg to be believed. And you do not have to keep handing keys to people who only visit your house to measure the walls. The day my daughter told a judge I was too senile to own a house was the day she learned memory is not the same thing as mercy.